Hello students, I'm Shukla Choudhury and welcome to my YouTube channel. In my today's video, we will discuss I.S.C class 12 poems, all 5 of them, their themes, key points and the figure of speech. So, listen to this video till the end, mark all the figure of speech, themes, key points so that you can score full marks in your I.S.C board exam. Let's start.
The first poem is Telephone Conversation, poet Volsoinka. The central theme of this poem is the prejudice and discrimination based on color and race. The poet exposes the prevalence of prejudices based on race and color of the skin. He brings to light how such prejudices are covertly practiced by many people in society. He highlights the hypocritical nature of these people through a telephone conversation between prospective tenant, an African man and a British landlady. The racist attitude of the woman in the poem comes out from the way the woman puts the receiver down and says nothing about her decision to give the house on rent. It seems that her only concern was to know the social background of her prospective tenant, whose confession in the beginning of the poem that he is an African suggests that discrimination of this type is prevalent in the society. The attitude of the woman of rejecting a man of renting her accommodation simply because he is of different race and color evoke satirical response from the black collar when he asks her to come and see for herself the color of his skin. The poem is thus a satire on social discrimination that people indulge in. Now for the figure of speech in this poem. You can also check out there is a separate video on figure of speech, type of figure of speech, what are they in my channel. You can also check out that video. But here I am discussing the figure of speech that's there in this particular poem. First, enjambment. Lines like down in my passport, silence for practoscopic flight of fancy, till truthfulness changed her accent hard on the mouthpiece. What's that? They are all under the figure of speech enjambment. Second, end stop, like lines like I hate a wasted journey, I'm African, or of rancid breath of public hide and speak. Third, Casora, how dark, I had not misheard, are you light? These lines come under this particular figure of speech. Then there is alliteration. Red booth, red pillar box, red double tired, cynical, crushing, silent, surrendered, flight of fancy, they are all alliteration. Next, assonance, lipstick coated, long gold rolled cigarette holder pipe. Then there is a pun, figure of speech pun, like stench of rancid breath. Then there is parataxis, like the landlady swore she lived off premises. Then silence transmission of button B, button A. I have written all this, you can see clearly in front of your eyes. Then there is polypton, silence transmission, these are all polypton. Metaphor, voice when it came, lipstick coated, wavelength adjusted, they all come under metaphor. Then there is simile, like plain or milk chocolate, like brunette. Now let's come to the second poem, Tithonus, written by the famous poet Alfred Lord Tennyson. And this particular poem by Tennyson is based on Greek myth. According to the myth, Tithonus, the son of a king, marries the goddess of dawn. She grants him eternal life but forgets to gift him everlasting youth. It results in extreme agony and frustration to Tithonus as he turns old and weak. He fails to match the youth and passionate feelings of his beloved wife. The whole poem focuses on the agony and pain resulting from the immortality granted to Tithonus. Tithonus repeatedly pleads a release from his present condition of eternal living. The theme is immortality is not meant for human beings, and natural order should not be disturbed. Every earthly being has to meet death. No human being can follow the ways of God. It emphasizes the idea that human beings should be happy with mortality and the reality of death. Immortality is a curse, and this poem shows this happening in case of Tithonus. Now please check out the figure of speech. As I told you in the case of previous poem also, what figure of speech means what, they are all there in my another video you can check out in my channel. For now I am discussing the figure of speech that's there only in this poem. For instance, you can see alliteration in lines like bosom beating with the heart renewed, then yearning for my yoke, then why wilt thou ever scare me with thy tears, glow with the glow. Then there is simile in lines like a white-haired shadow, roaming like a drake, like wealthy men, like that strange song I heard Apollo sing, while Ilion like a mist nose into towers. Then there is metaphor, like in lines like a white-haired shadow beat the twilight into flakes of fire. Then this personification also when the poet says yours as a guide, weeping vapors or storm clouds. Then there is parallelism in lines like the woods decay and the woods decay and fall. Thou wilt renew thy beauty morn by morn. The third poem is Beethoven, poet, shame, poet, sang. Beethoven can be described as Beethoven's biography in verse, which underlines the idea that most of us cannot differentiate between a madman and a genius, because a genius does things abnormally. Most of what he says or does is beyond the comprehension of most people, and his acceptance by others is always difficult. Beethoven was a great musician but was not satisfied. In order to achieve the pinnacle of excellence, he found it difficult to connect with others. He remained isolated and aloof. To make matters worse for him, he was hard in hearing. So most of the people, even the masters in his field, failed to understand him. Eventually, they realized his greatness and admitted the originality of his compositions. His music was divine, though like his own father, Beethoven said to himself that it was not good enough. Another theme of this poem is that physical and emotional abuse in one's childhood or boyhood leaves deep hurt on the side of a person, which is permanent and remains with a person throughout the life. The unrealistic expectations of his father from him and the harsh and cruelty he received from him did not allow him to enjoy his own success even when he was at the height of his career. The figure of speech that you can find here in this poem, number 1's alliteration in lines like, his father made a habit out of hitting him. Little boy living in a house. Half the passion that was held. Mock the man. Make fun of the madness. Causing comets to collide. Then you can find assonance in lines like, the man got down on his knees for no one. Number 3, enchantment. Living in a house where mercy had to be earned, he couldn't hear the audience clapping, couldn't hear the woman. Then there is personification, angels whose harps could not hold half the passion. The music invaded their nervous system and muted the legs of his piano. Entire universe had begun to cry. All these lines comes under the figure of speech personification. Then this poem is full of imagery, both visual and auditory, and there is hyperbole also in lines like, the distances reaching past the towers of Babylon, turning solar system into symbols, shook the constellation. Then the poem comes, fourth poem, Small Towns and the River, poet Mamandai. This poem is a contrast between the transient nature of human life and the eternity of nature. The poet has effectively depicted this contrast by comparing small towns with a river. The idea is life and death is a ceaseless process. Life follows death and death leads to a new life. Human life is transient and so is death. On the other hand, nature and rituals observed by generations are permanent. Small towns for her are reminders of death, as she finds living in a small town monotonous where nothing changes and life moves on slowly and ends in a death. On the other hand, she finds the river, which is symbolic of nature, quite vibrant as it continues its journey from the mountains to the plains, changes its course, undergoes a number of changes, but remains a permanent entity as the water in the river is immortal like our soul. The figure of speech here is alliteration. Mist on the mountain tops for the future. The dead are pleased pointing west. We all want to walk with the gods. Then there is antithesis in lines like life and death, life and death. Then there is inversion in the dreadful silence we wept. Then there is figure of speech personification in lines like, the wind howling down the gorge, the river has a soul. Small towns grow with anxiety. Then metaphors. Small towns always remind me of death. In the dreadful silence, in the cool bamboo restored in sunlight. Check this simile also, it's also there here in this line, like the torrent of grief. Then there's imagery also. My hometown lies calmly amidst the trees, looking at the sad wreath of tuberoses, mist on the mountain tops. Let's start now the fifth and the last poem of your syllabus. Death, Be Not Proud. Poet John Donne. Theme, there are basically three major themes. Number 1, the insignificance of death. Death is generally perceived as something that is terribly feared and no one seems to be ready for it. But in this poem, the poet has asserted that death has no real power and should not be feared, though some people consider it mighty and dreadful. He admonishes death for being too proud and tries to deflate its arrogance by suggesting that it does not hold any power on human beings and is deceived in believing that it overthrows human life by claiming it. The person does not die even if death apparently takes him, because death is only a heightened version of sleep which rejuvenates. Death cannot act independently. Fate, chance, kings, and criminals can kill anyone instantly. Death also has to take the help of many exterior agents like poison, war, or sickness. Second thing, courage in death. The poet faces death with defiance. He is not scared that death will put an end to his story. He is not even bothered about what comes after. He is confident that after a brief sleep, he will awaken into a much better eternal life and faces death with courage. The last thing, faith in God. The poem is filled with Christian religion undertones. According to Christian mythology, Christ is shown in his action of raising people from the dead and telling their loved ones that they were merely sleeping. Now for the figure of speech in this particular poem. Number 1, alliteration. Die not, poor death, but thy pictures be much more masked. This paradox also. Death itself shall be no more. Death itself shall die. Personification, when the poet says, poor death. Then there is assonance. In line like, thou thinkst thou much more most.
So dear students, noted the themes, key points and the figure of speech? That's important. And no one can stop you from scoring full marks in your board exam. And if you find this video really helped you, do not forget to like, subscribe and share with your friends. As I always tell, helping is an attitude. Keep good attitude. Best of luck.